Hey everyone, I am recording today's math lesson. I do apologize for any inconvenience if those of you were looking to be live today. I had a prior engagement that I couldn't get out of, so I decided to go ahead and record our lesson. So this could be accessed through Google Classroom, the same lesson plan document you guys have been using since our virtual learning has started. The link will be provided on that lesson plan. The activities are provided on the lesson plan, and we'll discuss the activities in today's PowerPoint presentation. So without further ado, I'm going to present my screen now, and we will get started with our math lesson. All right, guys. Why am I on mute? Unmute me. All right, let's hold tight because apparently I'm on mute and I don't know why. Oh no, I'm not on mute. Okay, sorry. There's always some hiccups with technology, so thank you for your patience. All right, so let's get started with today's lesson. So if you are just joining us this week and you didn't get a chance to join with us last week, we started our lesson on partitioning. So thanks for joining today. I'm going to review our standard and our learning objectives just as a review. Again, if you are just joining us today and you did not join with us last week, this will be kind of a review session, and we'll introduce some other tasks with our standard and learning objectives today. So the standard we're working on is partitioning circles and rectangles into 2 and 4 equal shares. You want to describe the shares using the words halves, fourths, or quarters. And you want to use phrases like half of, fourth of, or quarter of. We want to describe the whole as 2 or 4 of the shares, and we want to understand for these examples that decomposing, and like we talked about last week, we know decomposing is breaking the number apart. We want to do that into more equal shares that create smaller shares. So our learning objective, again, for this week is I can use repeated reasoning to help partition or divide. Partition is just a fancy word to say divide or slice or split together. We want to partition shapes or objects into equal parts. Okay, so let's review last week. Last week we watched the story, or watched the read aloud. The doorbell rang. It was by Pat Hutchinson. We discussed how partitioning or dividing took place in the story. We discovered that every time the door opened, more kids showed up. So the more kids that were there, the fewer cookies that could be partitioned. At the end of the story, there were 12 kids, so each kid received 1 cookie each. So today's lesson introduction, I want to read another story. Well, not read, but I want to give you all a good chance to watch another story entitled Give Me Half. Give Me Half is by Stuart J. Murphy. This story is also going to introduce you to fractions and partitioning shapes. So let's go ahead and watch that.
Let's start. Award-winning series of 63 mathematical concepts through simple stories. Give Me Half by Stuart J. Murphy, illustrated by G. Brian Karras. What if your brother had 1 whole pizza? You'd want half. It's half the pizza. Thinking ahead to dessert. I have 1 whole pizza, and it's pizza. I only want some pizza soup. You have to share pizza. It must be to you. One half pizza and one pizza make one whole pizza. Is one equals one. I gave you half of mine, so you must share yours too. I'll give you just one half juice and one half make one whole can. One and one is one. One equals one. I remember they had some big money. Because I wasn't. And you do. Fish it. And eat. And eat. One cupcake and one cupcake make a cup of two cups. It's two. Equals two. One is one. Make it. There's pizza.
Great. I hope you guys enjoyed that story. So again, if you play this presentation back and you're having trouble getting the story to play in the YouTube link or YouTube box here, you can click the link here and it'll send you straight to the read aloud as well. All right. So for our direct explanation, this is the part where I show you what to do and you all kind of give me feedback, or you take a look at what I'm doing. So now that we have watched the story, how did the brother and sister share or partition the pizza? How did they partition the juice? How did they partition the cupcakes? Did they partition their chores when they had the food fight? Were they able to partition those chores? I want you to take a moment and discuss this with your parent or guardian or sister or brother, whomever you may be watching this with. Just take a moment to think about, how was that pizza partition? How was the juice partition? How was the cupcakes partition? Could you think of any other way in the story that they partitioned? If you take a look at my example here at the bottom, I have one whole pizza and I partitioned it into two whole slices. Now, depending on how many slices the pizza had originally, I could determine exactly how many slices myself and whomever I was sharing it with would actually get. But this is a great example. But talk to your parent or guardian or whomever you're discussing this with right now. Talk to them about different ways that you could partition that pizza or the juice or the cupcakes. So let's talk about that now. Today we are going to partition other 2D shapes, just like the pizza. We're going to partition other 2D shapes into equal parts. So This is where we do our guided practice. We are going to partition some of these shapes. We're going to partition a circle, a rhombus, a triangle, and a rectangle. So I'm going to back out of my presentation for one moment, and I'm going to take you all to another page where we are going to partition our shapes. So here I have a rectangle, and I'm going to partition my rectangle into, let's say, two equal parts. Two equal parts. So here I am partitioning my rectangle into two equal parts. Is that two equal parts? No, it's not. One side, the right side here, is much bigger than the left side here. So I have not partitioned this into equal parts. So I'm going to erase, and I'm going to try again. Have I partitioned my rectangle into equal parts now? Great, I have. What if I wanted to partition my rectangle into four equal parts? So this is where we can partition or draw a line down the middle of our rectangle. So now I have divided or partitioned my rectangle into four equal parts. Another way that I could say is quarters. Just like four quarters make $1, four equal parts here make one whole rectangle. You could even, if you could notice this shape here, we made another rectangle inside, we made a smaller rectangle inside the bigger rectangle. So four equal rectangles make one whole rectangle, if you would like to look at it that way. I'm going to erase that, and I'm going to partition my circle. So I'm going to partition my circle just like I partitioned the pizza, and I'm going to go straight down the middle because I partitioned it into two equal parts. So when I have two equal parts, that is called halves. So I have two halves of a pie or pizza. So I have one half here and one half here. Again, if I wanted to partition my circle into fourths, I could draw a line down the middle or across the middle. And now I have partitioned my circle into four equal parts or fourths or quarters. Remember, one, two, three, four, fourths or quarters, just like a dollar. If I put a quarter here, a quarter here, and a quarter here, and a quarter here, those four quarters equal $1, a whole. Now, I'll go back and partition that rectangle so that you have a frame of reference. So now I want to partition my triangle. Now my triangle is not the same as my rectangle and my circle. So if I try to partition my triangle from the middle, from left to right, would that have made two equal parts? Are those parts halves? No, they're not. So I'm going to erase, and I'm going to try it a different way. I'm going to go vertical, up and down, and partition my rectangle up and down. So in a perfect world, that would have been a straight line. But for the purpose of this presentation, these two are equal parts. They are halves of each other. Okay. Now, what if I wanted to rotate? Now, my next shape is a rhombus. It is a rhombus. It is a rhombus if it's facing up and down. It is a rhombus if it is lying on its side. I remember we talked about in kindergarten, actually in kindergarten and early this year in first grade, about positioning shapes. No matter how I position it, it's still a rhombus. Same thing goes for my triangle. If I were to position my triangle here, it's still a triangle. Now my line that partitioned it is not equal, so I'll have to move that back. But no matter how I position my triangle, if I position it upside down, my shapes are still, my spaces or okay, good. My halves are still equal now that my triangle is upside down. but this only works for the triangle if it is upside down or right side up. So for my rhombus, I'm going to turn it back, right side up, and move it here so you can see it better. And then I'm going to partition my rhombus. I'm going to go straight down the middle. Are both these halves equal parts? Yes, they are. Now I want to partition this rhombus into fourths. I'm going to go from left to right. Again, in the perfect world, that would have been better. Try it again. Okay, that's a bit better. So it almost looks like a kite. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4. Again, I have partitioned my rhombus into 4 equal parts, or fourths, or quarters. Now, on your independent activity, there are options, or there are shapes where you will have to partition into thirds. So not only will you partition into halves and fourths, you will partition into thirds. So some shapes you can partition into thirds. A rectangle being a very good example. So I'm going to partition this rectangle into thirds. So for the sake of this presentation, let's just pretend that my lines are straight and that I have 3 equal parts here. So I have partitioned my rectangle into 3 equal parts. I have partitioned it into thirds. So you have thirds here, quarters or fourths here, quarters or fourths here, and then a half or halves here. Okay, great. So now we're going to go back into our presentation. And we are going to finish up with our independent practice activity. So this is the part where you do it. So you are going to complete the partitioning figures activity here. The worksheet is attached to this link. That is where you want to get the link for that worksheet. If you have a printer and can print and are printer accessible, you can print that worksheet out so that you can turn it into your teacher. If you do not have access to a printer and aren't able to print out, that is okay. You can get a white sheet of paper or a line sheet of paper and fold it into 10 rectangles. 10 rectangles. There's also an example of this in the lesson plans. So if you're not sure how I am saying fold it into tens, what are you supposed to do? You can go back and refer to that lesson plan, and that example is inside or embedded into the lesson plan. So again, you would fold your white sheet of paper into 10 rectangles and then draw each picture and follow these instructions. So on that first rectangle, you would draw a circle. The one next to it, you would draw a square, and you would partition that circle into fourths, or you will partition that square into fourths, and you would do that for the remainder of those shapes. If you are still having trouble with, excuse me, if you are still having trouble with partitioning and just need a little extra help, there is an additional resource. There is an additional resource that I have provided for you down here at the bottom. Again, that resource is available on this PowerPoint, and it will be available on the lesson plan as well for you to go back and review. So as a review and a closing, I want you to cut out different 2D shapes. You can cut out triangles, rectangles, circles, hexagons, pentagons, any 2D shapes, and see how many ways that you could partition the shape into equal parts. Or if you don't want to cut it out, you can use a whiteboard or a piece of paper, and you can just draw your shapes. Draw as many shapes as you can and demonstrate how many ways that you could partition this shape. Talk to your parent or guardian or your sibling about these shapes, and how they look like before you partition and what they look like after you have partitioned out. How many people could you partition this shape to if you had to divide it amongst a certain amount of people? So if you were able to partition your pizza or your pie or your circle into fourths, you could give that to 4 different people. If you can come up with a different way to partition those slices of pizza, show me that. So record your findings on a piece of paper. Again, you can use a piece of paper, you can cut out the shapes, You can use a dry erase board, a marker. You can use your tablet and draw. You can do any type of creative way that you can show your teacher how you were able to partition those shapes. And then I want you to turn this in the way that your teacher has asked you to turn your work in. So you're going to turn that in along with the worksheet that you have completed. So there will be two activities that you'll turn into your teacher. There will be, if I can go back, it'll be this partitioning figures worksheet, or the white sheet that you use to draw. And then it will be the white sheet that you use, or white sheet, or the cutouts that you'll use to partition your different shapes. If you choose to do the cutout sheets, the cutout 2D shapes, or the dry erase board, or something else that's not something that you could scan and send to your teacher, take a picture of it and send that to your teacher so that we all know that that's how you used your manipulatives. So now I'm going to stop sharing my screen. All right, guys. So that I hope that that video was sufficient and that you all understood the lesson. I hope that you all are able to partition your figures, partition your different shapes. If you have any questions about the activities, please feel free to contact your teachers and we can give you more information on how to do that. Again, check the videos out that I provided you for extra resources, and just have a good time watching the story and kind of working with your parents and your siblings about how partitioning your shapes. And try to look around your house and look for things that you could partition. We partition more often than we think, and we don't even realize that we're doing. And remember that this is important because these are the foundational building blocks that you'll use in order to start learning fractions and division. And those are the things that you'll need when you get to third grade and fourth grade and fifth grade. What we're doing right now, the partition of 2D shapes, is preparing you for second grade. I can tell you now that my daughter is partitioning shapes in second grade now, and they are working on rows and columns, and that rows and columns and arrays, that is a foundation for multiplication that she will learn and that you will learn in third grade. So it is very important that we master partitioning right now here, even though we're doing virtual learning. It's very simple. So again, if you have any questions, feel free to contact your teachers. Check out those additional resources, and I'll talk to you soon.